fellowship is still trying in September.
I think they are. All right. Why would you even put a decaf there? Very good, very good.
The only coffee I have.
Happy birthday.
Hey, Mitch. Oh, sorry, I called you and then I'm sorry. Okay, yes, you're there.
Okay.
I was about to, I was about to talk to you on the phone to let you know, yes, I am just well behind schedule on a Holy Trinity Sunday, and then I forgot I had your number. So, yeah, why not? Yeah.
That's fine. We're here. Julie and I are both.
I am being told that I've got an unstable interwebs connection, so this might cause trouble when I do this. Come on. Hang on, baby. All right. Mitch is still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. It's playing nice.
High octane.
The high octane stuff. All right, we are just going to go ahead and I want this to do what I want it to do. It never does. Let's just go ahead and open up the Bibles to Job. So we got Mike Frazier and myself here in person. And we got Julie and Mitch here on the line. And I'm sitting down to try to make it more friendly, I think is what I'm doing here. I think that's how that's going to go. So I'll be looking this way because that's where Mike is. This is where Mitch is. You're over here. All right, we're good. I'm going to grab my notes. And then I'm going to close that door.
Morning, Mike.
Morning, Mitch. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
Great.
I kind of want to make it so you can see each other.
I don't have my camera on.
So we could be reading, seeing that. That's how we say the name. It's going to be good. All right. I said Job 19. I, of course, meant Job 20. And since we are charging back into this, and you guys were here for the first time through, we started back in January, and we got as far as March doing Job. So if you would like to review that, I'm pretty certain all of these things pretty well are available on my YouTube channel. So listen to that. I'm sounding like I've heard those things before about like and subscribe and go check out the backlog. All right, Mike, you're there?
I'm here.
He's there. It's Zophar, right? Is it labeled Zophar?
Yes.
Right. I just feel like it should be Zotar, but that's because I like the movie Big. So yeah. All right, Lord bless us as we hear from Zophar, and we are going to attempt to also hear from Job in the half an hour that we get together. Not Zoom enforced, that's me because we got service coming up again. All right, so if, take in there, Mitch.
I understand.
You are very kind. Okay, I will go through a few of the verses from Zophar's speech, but I want you to keep in mind, it seems to me, having reviewed Zophar's speech, that he is saying his main point: evildoers get what they deserve, namely evil. So evil stuff, bad stuff is going to happen to bad people. Bad stuff does happen to bad people. There, I've said it a whole bunch of different ways. Now we recall, of course, Job had been steadfastly claiming, I haven't done anything wrong. So these bad things happening to me make no sense. Zophar he's not buying it. Now he's just like, Job, you just can't tell me that that's actually true. Bad stuff happens to bad people. They get their comeuppance. This is blatant evidence now that I'm seeing you having a bunch of bad stuff happening. You are guilty somehow or the other. You have done evil. So to read a few of Zophar's verses, I'm in the New International Version, is what we're hearing. The Naamathite replied, "My troubled thoughts prompt me to answer, because I am greatly disturbed. I hear a rebuke that dishonors me, and my understanding inspires me to reply." He introduces himself. One more time. Okay, you just keep on saying stuff that I don't agree with, and now my understanding and knowledge, I have got to share it with you. "Surely you know how it has been from of old, ever since man was placed on the earth." It's well known to everybody. "The mirth of the wicked is brief. The joy of the godless lasts but a moment." So as much as the joy of the godless will last but a moment, and that is something that Zophar observes here and points out and says everybody knows this, still we're going to see through the course of his speech that the godless, even though their joy is brief, they totally consider it worth it. If you glance your eyes forward to verse 12, you will see Zophar say there, "Though evil is sweet in his mouth, and he hides it under his tongue, they love it. They hold it dear. It stays always at the ready. Even though the joy of it is brief, yet they cannot quit it. The evil love their evil. It's sweet in their mouths." And then back to verse 5. "Though his pride reaches to the heavens and his head touches the clouds, even though it appears it's going to be going well with him. But," verses 7 through 9, "he will perish forever, like his own dung." I'll pause there a moment because I made a note in my Bible here to not use sanitized language here because it seems Zophar is really trying to make a strong rhetorical point. Mitch, I presume that our NIVs match up there in chapter or verse 7, part A.
Only slightly different, but very, very similar.
What did they say? Excrement? Did they say?
Oh, that one is the same.
Oh,
Like
dung.
his,
Yeah, Mitch.
yes.
Okay.
The dung, it uses dung.
It says dung. It's kind of a polite word, but
I agree.
there you go. But he's saying he's going to perish forever, like dung. And those who've seen him, see, Zophar says, eventually the bad stuff happens to him. We'll say, where is he? Like a dream, he flies away, no more to be found, banished like a vision of the night. The eye that saw him will not see him again. His place will look on him no more. See, it all goes away. And then verse 10 there, his children must make amends to the poor. So it will fall upon the children that they will pay a price for their dad's evil. That the ones who have done so poorly, that not only will they have their comeuppance, but that will be so bad that the children are going to suffer because of it. I am pretty certain it is the prophet Ezekiel who points out the proverb that people tried to use to say their problems were their father's faults. And I think that proverb went, the fathers eat sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. And in other words, the fathers have something unpleasantly sour to eat, and you know that face you pull when you have something unpleasantly sour. That happens to the kiddos. Ouch. Yeah. And in Ezekiel's point is that the children are trying to, when Ezekiel makes it, not Zophar here, the children are trying to say that it is unjust for them to be punished for what their dads did wrong. Zophar here is pointing out that dynamic, indicating that you see it happen all the time. It's so bad for the dad that the children end up being troubled by it. Okay, part B of verse 10. His own hands must give back his wealth. Again, the whole verse is, his children must make amends to the poor. His own hands must give back his wealth. And I get a little intrigued there, because we had the first part of the verse is very simple. His children are going to pay the price. But then in the second part of the verse, it says his own hands will pay back his wealth. And seems that we thought it would fall to the children, but then in part B indicates that no, the wicked man does have to pay. Or, and this is a little bit compelling for my reading to it, the his hands is in reference to the children. So what little the children had left to them, then that would be, he would have to give it back. So it does all fall on the children there to hand over that wealth. They lose it because of their dad's evil. The youthful vigor. Hello, Tammy. Hello. Oh, yeah, no problem. Come on through. I got your brother here on the Zoom. Yeah, Tammy says, hey. And I presume so does Scott and Cassie. Yeah, they say hey also. The youthful vigor, we're in verse 11, that fills his bones will lie with him in the dust. See where all the vigor ends up, in the dust. Do not trust in it your own strength to endure. I just celebrated the birthday, and so I have been hearing, I think Mike and I were just talking about the struggles that the vigor goes away. Yes, don't get old goes the advice that is impossible to keep. But the youthful vigor that delighted in it, see, though evil is sweet in his mouth and he hides it under his tongue, though he cannot bear to let it go and keeps it in his mouth, yet, and then now here all the bad stuff happens to evil people eventually, verses 14 to 18. The food turns sour in his stomach. It becomes the venom of serpents within him. He'll spit out the riches he swallowed. God will make his stomach vomit it up. He will suck the poison of serpents. The fangs of the adder will kill him. He will not enjoy the streams, the rivers flowing with honey and cream. What he toiled for, he must give back uneaten. He will not enjoy the profit from his trading. We've seen this all happen. For he has oppressed the poor and left them destitute. He has seized houses he did not build. So thereafter much of Zophar's speech, that verse jumps out at me as a definition for what does Zophar consider evil. He's been on about how bad the evil are and it goes badly for them. But what exactly are the evil things that these people are doing? And here Zophar gives answer to that question. Oppressing the poor, leaving them even more destitute, seizing houses he did not build. So if Zophar were among us today, who do you think he would expect to be punished among us? I honestly ask that question. Who do we know who is oppressing the poor and leaving them destitute? Human trafficking. What comes to mind, Mitch?
I can't help but think that it's definitely a parallel with the political nature of the United States right now. So, former president and all the minions that are casting dispersion on our democracy and living a lie.
It is super frustrating to see the oppression and I think a while ago, this is going back a few generations, but certainly the injustices that were memorialized around the time of the Dust Bowl, that where people lost their houses and the like. Any such instance where whole swaths of people were in that way exploited. So then, going along here, Zophar never really gets happy. He's always just upset about things. Surely he will have no respite from his craving. He cannot save himself by his treasure. Even though over and over his vigor fails him and the ill-gotten gains prove powerless to endure, to save him from his trouble, still, he can't stop craving it. Can't stop trying to get this treasure. Just keeps on digging with that shovel. Maybe I'll eventually dig up. And then verses 21 through 28, it's the same thought as 14 through 18. The bad stuff happens to the evil people eventually. Nothing is left for him to devour. His prosperity does not endure. In the midst of his plenty, distress overtakes him. So even though he's got a lot, he's still distressed. The full force of misery coming upon him. And when he has filled his belly, God will vent his burning anger against him and rain down blows upon him. And though he flees from the iron weapon, the bronze-tipped arrow pierces him, and he pulls it out of his back. The gleaming point comes out of his liver. Terrors come over him. Total darkness lies in wait for his treasures. They'll just go away. A fire unfanned will consume him. Doesn't even need to be helped. The fire will be massively consuming. Just doesn't need help to get burning, and devour what is left in his tent. The heavens will expose his guilt. The earth will rise up against him. A flood will carry off his house. Rushing waters on the day of God's wrath. Bad stuff. It's going to happen eventually. And then a summary statement, such is the fate that God allots the wicked. Such is the heritage appointed for them by God. And so then, you're Job now. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm in the middle of a book called A Problem from Hell by Samantha Power.
Yeah.
And it is scandalous to think how many atrocities the United States turned a blind eye to, that they knew about and just ignored all over the world. Cambodia, Middle East, Romania, Turkey, just it's almost sickening to. I'm actually listening to it on Audacity, but it's
It turns the stomach.
definitely a sad history recollection of.
And doesn't it get worse when some of those tragedies aren't just ignored, but exploited opportunistically?
So I just finished a mini series called Deep State, which highlighted the fact that all these rich businessmen were basically running the government and using Secret Service and spy agencies around the world to create problems and start wars, and these guys would capitalize on, the big fame. What they made $6 billion on the first Iraqi war by going in and building military bases, and then the military bases bombed everything, and then they rebuilt it, and so they made money going in, selling arms to the government, and then contracting for rebuilding of everything they destroyed. And now they were in the midst of starting a new conflict in Africa when the series ended, and it's sickening to how, even though it's not a true story, it's sure makes sense that the reason money is definitely the root of evil, and these guys are just making it hand over fist and terrorizing the world.
And Zophar, and so in this case, we don't really have a problem with what Zophar's saying, because he's pointing out, even though all of these terrible deeds are being done, and even though they get it, it cannot save them, they still can't quit it. It's still, verse 12, sweet in their mouths. It's still, verse 20, can't stop, or he will have no respite from his craving. Just continually going more and more for the gains of earthly wealth. And then I'm hearing you say the reverses and troubles that we have had internationally and diplomacy and pretty well also militarily in continued warfare and uprising. Zophar would say it would all make sense if, as those charges against the nation have been leveled and others in power. Sound about right? You're reading.
Exactly. Well, and a big premise of the Problem from Hell book that I'm in the middle of talks about the issue of genocide and how it took almost 50 years before the United Nations, especially the United States, agreed to participate or recognize that genocide was truly an issue that had occurred and needed to be addressed. And it was interesting that Bill Proxmire, who was the senator from Wisconsin, set some kind of record that every day he got up at the beginning of every session and made a plea that the United States would pass the genocide.
Okay.
Except, the recognition. We couldn't agree that it was bad.
Just it couldn't get a vote in.
No.
Well, Job has quite a response to Zophar, in which he's in chapter 21, in which I would premise it this way. Job, in the speech he's about to make, you guys, namely Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, you've been saying evildoers get what they deserve, that they get evil. But do they really? Because I see example upon example that they don't. They get away with it. And I wish they didn't. I wish God would punish them, but he doesn't. And yet, Job is punished. So they try to tell Job that he deserves it as an evildoers, but as Job's observing, and he's going to point out here, evildoers aren't punished. So what then? So I'm punished. What's that mean? You guys say evildoers are punished, but let's take a look at it. They aren't. So then why am I punished? There's some unsaid implications that Job has explicitly said in previous speeches that fit this speech. Job calls himself blameless. He's even described that in the opening chapters. And God's punishment just doesn't make sense to him. Now, he's not going to say it in this speech, but Job wants God to explain the disaster that's befalling him. But the speech in the end satisfies itself with poking holes in the friends' point of pointing. They say bad stuff happens to bad people, and Job says, and I don't think it actually does, guys. So what do we make of that? So Job replied, and they all do a good job of making snarky introductions to their speeches. Listen carefully to my words. Let this be consolation you give me. You listening, actually. Bear with me while I speak, and after that, you may continue. After I have spoken, mock on. Go ahead. You've ignored me over and over. You've mocked me every other time I've spoken. Why should this time be any different? Still, here goes. Let me say it. And he goes. Verses 4 through 6. Job gets why they would think he deserves punishment, because he's obviously had disaster fall upon him. and the facts of his suffering dismay him even more than the friends are dismayed. So listen to him say, look, is my complaint directed to man? Why shouldn't I be impatient? Look at me, be astonished, clap your hands over your mouth. When I think about all this, I'm terrified. Trembling seizes my body. Now, as he goes through the observations he's about to make in verses 7 through 13, I would just ask, can we join Job to affirm what he here observes? I say that kind of rhetorically because, of course, we can. Why do the wicked live on, growing old and increasing in power? They see their children established around them. Their offspring are before their eyes. Their homes are safe and free from fear. The rod of God is not upon them. Their bulls never fail to breed. Their cows calve and do not miscarry. They send forth their children as a flock. Their little ones dance about. They sing to the music of tambourine and harp. They make merry to the sound of the flute. They spend their years in prosperity and go down to the grave in peace. Anyone else kind of thinking about the scenes in The Godfather where I guess I don't really know which one, but where they're kind of constantly doing big family friendly things. I mean, family's like super important, right? Where they just affirm their children and they're just trying to take care of everyone. And then the movie makers decide to, and they do this in other movies, to show them in a family scene, one time being the gentle grandfather. And then in the next scene, they're doing atrocious things in order to get their ill-gotten gains.
First one has the baby being dead. Something brutally just
Mm-hmm.
a ton of people. Whoa.
Seems that kind of movie came to mind as I was reading through Job here about, he points out all this good stuff, all this good life that they get to enjoy, and it goes well for them. And yet they are, Zophar's got them well explained, evil, oppressing the poor, stealing houses. All right. Now, verses 14 and 15. Yet they say to God, leave us alone. We have no desire to know your ways. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? What would we gain by praying to him? Now, it's pretty self-evident Job's complaint against the evildoers who are getting away with it here, as it's translated for us in the NIV. Now, my circles don't include a whole ton of godless people, but this seems a candid and blunt statement of their opinion and attitude.
Are you sure of that?
I'm not, but I mean, all right, say it again, Mitch.
I just said, are you sure of that statement?
Which statement? That my circles don't include a lot of godless people?
Correct.
Okay.
That's a big congregation.
We do got a big congregation. And as small as our town is, there's still plenty of people in it. But as Job here, Job's kind of giving voice to a believer's statement regarding the opinion and attitude of unbelievers, right? They say, God, leave us alone. We have no desire to know your ways. Who's the Almighty that we should serve him? What would we gain by praying to him? So as much as I'm seeing Job here talking about the evil who have no use for God, there's a warning in here that goes right back to the premise of this book. The question, what would we gain by praying to God? Right at the beginning, Satan said Job only worshiped God because God granted him great wealth. So if a person only worships God because he or she gains materially by it, this is the exact kind of false worship that Satan suspects humans bear toward God. God granted wealth, and that's why they worship him. And so Job is here pointing out there's so many people who don't worship because there's not really any money to be made in it. And that gives us certainly a strong word of warning to not worship for that reason. If a person only worships God because there is material gain in it, well, then this is false worship. This is worship. This is faith that will die by persecution. This is faith that will die by the concerns of wealth. If worship is only valued because it makes you feel better, that's not worship of God. That's worship of emotional well-being. If prayer is only for gaining daily bread, there I switched over to the Lord's Prayer here. If prayer is only for gaining daily bread, then the primary matters of God's holy name and of God's kingdom and of God's will being done, if our prayer is only for daily bread, and we're not praying, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, then this is, the daily bread becomes a God, not a gift. My thoughts and warning about how this insidiously gets after us. Good morning, Mr. Elmhurst. So in verses 16 through 19 now, Job has got some rhetorical questions that are going to restate verses 7 through 13 about how the evil get away with it. How often is the lamp of the wicked snuffed out? How often does calamity come upon them? The fate of God allots in his anger. How often are they like straw before the wind? How often are they like chaff swept away by a gale? It is said, God stores up a man's punishment for his sons. Well, let him repay the man himself so that he may know it. See, Job wishes that God would judge differently. Let his own evil eyes see his destruction. Let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care about the family he leaves behind when his allotted months come to an end? He's dead. He's outside of reach. He doesn't care. I would have you guys I would have you guys keep in mind the rich man and Lazarus as we hear these next verses. Verses 22 through 26. Can anyone teach knowledge to God since he judges even the highest? One man dies in full vigor, completely secure and at ease, his body well nourished, his bones rich with marrow. Another man dies in bitterness of soul, never having enjoyed anything good, and side by side they lie in the dust, and worms cover them both. Rich man and Lazarus. When Jesus finally comes on the scene, he gives an answer to Job here. But the friends who are on the scene with Job at the moment, they're not equipped to give an answer to Job on this point. But in the fullness, good morning, Kinsley. But in Job here, the question just hangs there. Can anyone teach God knowledge since he judges the highest? What are we to make of one man dying in full vigor, and he is evil, and one man dying in bitterness of soul, never having enjoyed anything good, and yet was an honorable one? And side by side, they lie down in the dust. Well, Jesus teaches that parable, rich man and Lazarus, indicating how the knowledge of God comes to pass. Now then also, in verses 27 and 28, you're going to get Job preempting the friends, or saying, he's preempting them, because they've been saying all along that Job's situation is evidence of their argument, that he is evil, that he is being punished for it, even though his argument is, again, the evil don't get punished, so what do you mean, guys? He says, I know you full well what you're thinking, the schemes by which you would wrong me. You say, where now is the great man's house, the tents where wicked men live? Have you never questioned those who travel? So now he is going to appeal to the wider witness of the world around them, which they had appealed to the wider witness, but now Job appeals to the people who have more knowledge of the world. and he is going to do so in order to support his argument. Have you never questioned those who travel? Have you paid no regard to their accounts, that evil men are spared from the days of calamity, that the evil man is delivered from the day of wrath? Who denounces his conduct to his face? Who repays him for what he's done? He's carried off to the grave, and a watch is kept over his tomb. And the soil in the valley is sweet to him, and all men follow after him, and a countless throng goes before him. They've been doing this for generation upon generation, and they appreciate that once all of their evil is done, they get to die and be done with it and no longer care. And their children after them likewise, and their fathers before them likewise. Haven't you heard from people who travel? This is the way it is. The wicked get the prosperity. And so finally, Job once again dismisses the friends' arguments in verse 4. So how can you console me with your nonsense? Again, you guys saying bad things happen to bad people. Nothing is left of your answers but falsehood, because they don't. So what are we supposed to do with that? Mitch, that's too many pictures of Mitch on your... I mean, you put your face over your face, and then Julie will be next to you, and then there we go. Then we're all set. Nicely done. Okay. So we will pick up with Eliphaz next time in chapter 22, and we might get through Job in 23 and 24. I'll be impressed. Eliphaz has a bit more to say than Zophar did. The argument continues. Thank you, Mike. Bye, Mitch.
That's best.